I thought adding a smart lock to my pool fence would finally give me peace of mind. No more kids sneaking in, no more safety worries. But the next morning, I saw the HOA president's teenage son inside my yard, inspecting my new lock like he owned the place. When I told him to leave, he pulled out his phone and called 911 on me. Minutes later, police were at my door, and the HOA was already drafting a violation letter. What they didn't know was that my cameras had caught everything, and it would change everything. When I first moved into Willow Creek Estates, it felt perfect. Clean streets, tidy lawns, friendly waves. My modest home with a small pool felt like a dream. The HOA seemed harmless at first, just keeping things orderly. Then I met Karen, the HOA president, polite but sharp-eyed, always holding her clipboard like a badge. Her son Jake, 16 and arrogant, thought the neighborhood was his playground. It started small. Jake cutting through my yard saying, "My mom's the HOA president. We can go wherever we want." Days later, I got my first HOA warning. My pool gate lock didn't meet community standards. I replaced it anyway. But the notices kept coming. Trash cans, hose color, fence height. Each one felt more personal. Then came the morning I found Jake inside my yard. He claimed he was checking my lock for approval. When I told him to leave, he called 911. Within minutes, 2 officers were at my driveway. Karen watching smugly from across the street. I showed the cops the camera footage, Jake trespassing, me staying calm. They sighed and said I was in the right, but the damage was done. The next day, another HOA letter arrived. Unauthorized modification to perimeter safety. Equipment. That's when I knew this wasn't about rules. It was Revenge D. I emailed the HOA board with proof my lock was legal. Karen replied coldly, "Homeowner modifications must be approved. Failure to comply will result in daily fines, for a lock." From that moment, the harassment grew. Random inspections, photos of my fence, my pool, and my furniture. I started gathering everything, letters, emails, and camera logs. I wasn't backing down. One night, my phone pinged, motion alert. On my screen, Jake, climbing my fence again. I caught him red-handed. That's when I sent Karen a cease and desist for harassment and trespassing. Her response came fast. "You can't threaten me. I am the HOA." That arrogance said it all. So I went to the county, filed a report, and soon city inspectors showed up at her door. Turns out half her rules weren't even legal. Whispers spread through Willow Creek. Neighbors started talking, stories, of unfair fines and intimidation. I called for an emergency HOA meeting citing misuse of funds and authority. Karen tried to block it, but people had had enough. When the meeting began, I stood before the packed room and said, "Before we talk about fences, let's see the truth." I played the footage. Jake trespassing, the 911 call. Every lie. The room erupted. Neighbors shouted, some in shock, others furious. Karen tried to shut me down, yelling about privacy, but no one listened. For the first time, people stood up to her. One by one, residents shared their stories of harassment. By the end, the crowd voted. Karen was removed as president, pending investigation. But she wasn't finished yet. Weeks later, I got a subpoena. Karen was suing me for defamation and emotional distress. I couldn't believe it. Still, I gathered every document, every photo and every video, and walked into that small courtroom. "Ready?" Karen sat beside her lawyer. Jake slouched next to her. Her attorney painted me as a vindictive homeowner. When it was my turn, I calmly said, "The footage wasn't defamation, it was evidence." Then I showed the video doe. Silence filled the courtroom. The judge leaned forward, watching Jake on the screen trespassing. Then he turned to Karen and said, "I've seen enough. The case dismissed with prejudice." Then he added firmly, "Harassment through an HOA is still harassment." Karen's face turned crimson. The control she'd clung to finally broke. The weeks after the verdict were surreal. I'd walk my dog past the same houses that had once felt cold and judgmental. And now people smiled, waved, stopped to chat. The tension was gone. One evening, as the sun dipped low, I passed an older man tending to his garden. Someone Karen had once fined for having a non-compliant shed. He looked up, smiled, and said, "You didn't just fight for yourself, son. You fought for all of us. It hit me. Then, he was right. The smart lock had been a spark. But the fire had exposed something deeper: fear. For years, Karen had ruled by intimidation, and nobody had dared to push back. All it took was one person saying no, and everything began to crumble. Within a month, the HOA board was completely restructured. New members were elected, people who actually cared about community, not control. They implemented new transparency rules, fair voting procedures, and limits on how long any one person could serve as president. Stayed on the sidelines. I'd had enough politics for a lifetime, but I watched from a distance as things slowly began to heal. The new board even hosted a neighborhood barbecue, the first in over 5 years. Kids splashed in pools, music played, and people laughed. It felt normal, and normal had never felt so good. 3 months later, a moving truck appeared in front of Karen's house. Boxes stacked high, blinds half drawn. She looked tired, worn, a far cry from the clipboard queen who once ruled every lawn and fence. Jake helped her load boxes, quieter than I'd ever seen him. I watched from across the street, not with gloating satisfaction, but with quiet closure. Rumor had it she tried joining another HOA across town, but when people Googled her name, the story followed. The court records were public. Her former neighbor's testimony circulated on local Facebook groups. Her reputation was done. Jake gave me one last look before they drove off. It wasn't anger this time. It was something like regret. Maybe he'd finally understood that power built on fear doesn't last. As their car turned the corner, I felt the last bit of tension leave the neighborhood. That evening, I stood by the pool again, the same fence, the same lock. The smart lock blinked softly in the fading light, its small blue LED reflecting in the calm water. It was peaceful now. The air was still. I thought about everything that had happened, how something so small, a simple safety upgrade, had revealed years of corruption and fear. I realized then that HOAs, like people, only work when they're held accountable. They're supposed to protect, not control. Control thrives in silence. Truth thrives in exposure. And in the end, truth won. The lock clicked softly behind me, a gentle sound, almost symbolic. It wasn't defiance anymore. It was peace. Because protecting what's yours isn't rebellion. It's your right. And sometimes, standing your ground doesn't mean making noise. It means refusing to back down when silence is what they expect. The sun set behind the fence, painting gold across the pool water. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free.